Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight, this afternoon. My name's Rachel Jarman. My other half, Brett, is at a funeral. So turns out that is what we do, and that is the advantage of having two of us, is that we can make beautiful days happen no matter when they happen to fall. And if we have anything planned, we just split up. So we're better together, but you get me today. So today we're going to be chatting a little bit about a topic that we don't know everything about as funeral directors, but we know who to call. A lot of times we have people come in and plan their funerals, and a lot of times you'll see funeral homes do seminars or education on your funeral and how to plan your funeral. But we're not going to do that today. We have some information about planning your funeral, and we are more than happy to help you do that. But a question that we get a lot that doesn't get answered at these kinds of sessions is, what about that moment when somebody dies? What about that time? What does it look like? What do I expect? Sometimes we have the benefit of having hospice involved, and so we get a little bit of that ahead of time, and sometimes we don't. How old were you when you learned to call 911? Anybody? Like 6, 7, maybe? And we don't necessarily think about that or talk about that between the age of 6 or 7 when we learn how to do it and when we need it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to address some of those moments that we don't get back and that we want to make sure go as smoothly as possible. So we have experts on the topic here. We're going to have some time for questions at the end. Harold is with the cemetery, and he's going to scoot out a little bit early. So if you do have questions for Harold, we'll have him call you, or we'll just make sure that we get you in touch with Harold. That brings me to, you have a little half sheet in front of you. This has each of our names on it. It also has a spot for your contact information. So if you want more information from anybody up here, just fill this out and set it in the back. There's also a spot that asks you if there's anything else you'd like us to talk about, any other topics. So we're looking at having a session about grief at some point down the road, maybe in the next year as well. But there are lots of other topics that we'd be happy to get some people in to talk about and go over. Death is something we don't get the opportunity to talk about a lot, and it is something we are all going to do. So that is here for you. There's also an outline of each speaker and what they're going to talk about so that you have that in front of you. And we are recording today's session, so if you do have questions at the end, I'm going to bring the mic around for those so that the people that are watching it can hear those questions. And if you know anybody who couldn't make it today, just let them know. That'll be up on our YouTube page and our website, so they'll be able to watch it. With that in mind, I'm going to pass things over to Alan. Each person here is going to tell you who they are and then talk to you a little bit about what they know. So here we go.
Good afternoon. My name is Alan Perry. I'm the director of the Lenox Ambulance. My wife and I have lived in Lenox, I believe, about 13 years now. My youngest 2 kids graduate from high school in about 3 weeks, so we're moving into that different stage of life as well. I think expert might be a little bit of a stretch. I'm not going to say I'm an expert, but I will answer questions to the best of my ability. I've had the honor of walking through this stage, this point with many families over the last few years. When you call 911, most of the time you're going to get me or one of my team. Our ambulance team here in Lenox right now, we have 16 people on there, ranging paramedics to EMTs, and we will be the ones that show up when you call 911. So when you call 911, actually one of my EMTs is a dispatcher for 911, and so I reached out to him and I said, what questions do you ask when someone calls 911 and says, so-and-so is unresponsive, so-and-so is not breathing? And the questions he gave me that they'll go through are they breathing? Is there a pulse? So they're going to ask you to check a pulse and see if you can see that they're breathing or not. Are they making any sounds? Are they making a snoring sound? Usually that snoring sound means they have an obstructed airway, so they're going to coach you through how to open that airway and see if that will make a difference. While they're asking you these questions, they're also getting us en route as well. They're going to give you instructions how to start CPR and tell you how to get them on the floor, how to do the compressions, how to do the breaths, all those things. They're also going to ask if, is the patient cold? Are they stiff? Is there any injuries that you can see? Things that are not sustainable with life where they may not have you start that CPR. And they're also going to ask you what temperature that patient is and if they're covered. Because if a patient happens to pass away and they're covered, they could still be warm for quite a while. So those questions are really pertinent on whether or not what we have and how fast that we come with our trucks. When EMS runs on scene, a lot of times our PD is already on scene. All of the cops, both deputies and city cops, and all of our communities in the area, actually across the state of South Dakota, are equipped with AEDs, or defibrillators, in the truck. The Helmsley Foundation provided every law enforcement agency in the state of South Dakota with AEDs for their vehicles. So they will a lot of times beat us there. They will come in, they will take over CPR if you're doing that. They will put that AED on there and start working the resuscitation event. If the shock is able to be given, they will do that, and then when we get on scene, we will take over. When EMS arrives, we will come in, we'll start asking questions. We'll obviously start CPR immediately, but as we're doing that, we'll ask questions like, what's the patient's medical history? Have they been feeling well? Have they been sick at all? Any injuries, any falls in the recent past? When was the last time that someone saw them normal or talked to them even on the phone and it was normal as possible? Also, the other question we may ask is this: do they have a DNR? A DNR is a do not resuscitate form. This is a form that, and I know Molly's going to talk a little bit more about it as well. It's a form that you and your doctor have a discussion about and sign. If you have a DNR, which means we will not start CPR, we will not continue CPR, we need to have a copy of that signed form when we get there. If we don't have a copy of that form, unfortunately, we have to continue the process, which means we do CPR. Sorry. And I'll explain CPR a little bit. If you're not familiar with it, CPR consists of us doing compressions on your chest. The older we get, the more cartilage that's in our rib cage turns to bone. When that happens, we start breaking ribs. And if you've ever had a broken rib, you know it's very, very painful. A lot of times when we do CPR, we will break most of the ribs in the body in doing that. If we get the patient back, it's going to be very, very painful. Statistically, less than 10% of outside of hospital cardiac arrests survive to hospital discharge. It's just a very, very small portion. And that's one of those things, you just have that conversation with your doctor. Do you want that process done? Do you want us to try to bring you back? And if you don't, those documents are very, very important. If we get on scene, there are times we may not start CPR or not continue CPR. Some of those would be like if we see an injury that's not sustainable with life, we're not going to continue. If the patient is stiff, we're not going to continue, or if they have what's called lividity. What lividity is, if you would look at the lowest part of that body to the floor. If it's kind of a purple color, we are not going to go any further. That is the blood pooling at the bottom with gravity to the bottom of the body. And we're not going to go on because we cannot bring them back at that point. Let's see. Process of working a code or a resuscitation event. We will come in, we will put on what's called a Lucas, which is a mechanical CPR device, so it frees up an extra set of hands for us. It's a device that does consistent compressions. I don't know if you guys have seen them. They're pretty nice for the aspect that gives us the ability to do other things. We're going to start an IV, or we're going to take and we're going to drill a needle into one of your bones so we can give IV medications. Epinephrine, sodium bicarbonate, calcium chloride, different medications depending on what's going on. We also have the cardiac pads on so we can defibrillate if possible. We can defibrillate 2 different rhythms, and when doing that, if we can restart the heart in a correct sinus rhythm, then we can a lot of times bring the patient back. I've worked probably about 50 codes in my career, and I have 2 saves. It just kind of shows the statistics of how many people survive a cardiac arrest, unfortunately. You will also notice that if we do not get that patient back, we are not going to transport to the hospital for them to continue the process. By that point, there is nothing else the hospital can do that we have not done on scene to bring that patient back. That's one that surprises a lot of people. They're like, why don't you take them to the hospital and continue? Well, there's nothing else that we can do at the hospital or the doctors can do at the hospital to bring them back at that point. So we will not transport unless we get them back. If we get them back, most of the time they are loaded on a helicopter and flown out. At that point, death notification. Most of the time it's either myself or one of my staff that will come and we will sit down with you. We'll explain what we've done since we've got there, the process, everything we've done, and kind of give you time to ask questions and if you have anything there. But then we will kind of explain the next steps. Most of the time that means we are not going to get the patient back. And so we will explain that and ask if you guys have any questions, anything else that you want us to do for you at that point. Like I said earlier, most of the time the law enforcement are going to be on scene first. And you'll notice that they'll be taking pictures. Don't be alarmed. Anytime there's an outside of hospital death, they have to do an investigation. Investigation means they're going to take pictures of the scene, of the house, of wherever they're found. They're also going to take pictures of the body. They're doing their investigation just to make sure there's no foul play. Typically, we know very quickly if there's foul play involved or not. And if there is, that's an automatic autopsy and they go to Sioux Falls. If there is not, we will make the call to the coroner's office. In Lincoln County, is there anybody here from not Lincoln County, from Turner County? Okay. Let me cover Lincoln County first, then we'll cover Turner County. In Lincoln County, a coroner will not come to your home. The paramedics on scene will make a phone call to the coroner's office in Sioux Falls. We'll answer a series of questions, patient's name, date of birth, what medical history we know they have, medications they have, any sicknesses they've been through recently, any falls, all that kind of stuff. And they will make the determination whether or not there's an autopsy from our phone call. If there is they do want to have an autopsy, then we take the body into the morgue at Sioux Falls at Sanford Hospital. If there is not an autopsy to be done, at that point in time, they will release the body to the funeral home, and we will move on with that process there. In Turner County, it's a little bit different. In Turner County, we will call the coroner. They will come to the scene, and they will determine from there. So it's just a little different process. Depends on where we're at. And I believe Turner County's coroner is it Ryan? Ryan from Hoffmeister Jones over there. So. Ryan Penning. We will also make the call to the funeral home if you guys would like us to. We will make the call to the funeral home if you guys would like. We know that's a difficult call to make. We can answer most of those questions, and we can get the funeral home coming. We will also stay on scene with you guys until the funeral home arrives, just so you're not there by yourselves, but also to help the funeral home when they get there with the removal. Let's see. And the last thing on my list I have to talk about is how this differs a little bit with vehicle accident deaths. If there is a death in a vehicle accident, we will, a lot of times, we'll take that body in for an autopsy. They want to determine whether or not it was medical, whether it was what caused that accident. The one difference you're going to see there is there's going to be a lot more investigation by the law enforcement. They're going to be taking a lot of pictures. They're going to be taking a lot of interviews from everybody that was involved just to see exactly what happened in that accident and if there was a crime committed. So that'd be the one difference there. I believe that's all I have. I'll give it to Molly.
Thank you, Alan. My name is Molly Sanchez. I am a patient care coordinator with Avera Hospice. I am a social worker by background, and I've been doing this for about 10 years. I've lived in Lenox for going on 11 years, so just a little behind Alan. So I want to talk about what happens when hospice is involved, when death is expected. That's going to look quite a bit different from what Alan just explained. But first, I like to tell people that just because you're on hospice does not mean death is imminent. It means that you have some sort of diagnosis going on that we know we cannot cure, and we know that you are not wanting to return to the hospital. You are not wanting to, continue labs and imaging and all of that, but that doesn't mean that death is imminent. what it does mean is you have a whole team of people behind you for when death does come. So when somebody passes away on hospice, right now you would call our office, and whether it's day or night, you would get a nurse, and the nurse will always attend a death that happens in the home. And so when they get there, they will contact the funeral home. They will, do all of that communication, take that off of the family. We will help arrange removal of the body, whether it is immediately or if for family purposes or religious purposes or whatever it may be, that's at a later time. We will help coordinate that. And then we also will dispose of any controlled medications that might be remaining in the home. We'll ask home medical equipment to pick up any equipment in the home, and then we will contact the primary care provider as well so that they are aware that their patient passed away. Autopsies are not routinely performed for hospice patients. Actually, I would say very, very seldomly. Sometimes it is a family's choice. A lot of times that is with our dementia patients where it can only truly be diagnosed post-mortem. But we do have coroner cases sometimes, particularly if there's been an injury that led up until the admission to hospice and then ultimately the death. So if there had been a fall where like your head had been hit and you had a brain bleed or something like that, a coroner is always going to get involved just to make sure that everything's kosher there. So one of the things I get asked an oddly large amount of times is transporting bodies across state lines. Sioux Falls is somewhat unique in the sense that we're not very far from Iowa, Nebraska, or Minnesota, whichever you're at. So if you're not local or maybe you're in Sioux Falls and you're not from here or Lenox, there's nothing that says you can't do it, but it is something that we would want you to stop and make the call to 911 to help assist with that, just to make sure that there's no issues with that. Like Alan was saying, so I do a lot with advanced care planning as well, which is not to say a DNR or a DNI. It is simply planning for future healthcare decisions. So, if you have heart failure, at what point in time is it no longer acceptable to you to continue to do all of the things to treat your heart failure? Where is your line of what it means to live well, and when you would want to stop all of the medical interventions and not necessarily stop what you're doing now, just stop starting any future interventions. So that is something I do a lot of outside of just my normal hospice stuff, because it's something that if we can keep people out of the hospital, nobody wants to be in the hospital. I tell people that all the time, even if you're there for a good reason, having a baby or something like that, nobody wants to be in the hospital. So just trying to figure out where that line is and help keep people where they want to be, which is their own homes, their own communities. Thinking about that, talking about that, planning for that, either with myself or with myself and family members so they're aware, it's never, ever, ever too early to do that. So that also brings me, though, to the DNR, the DNI. So do not resuscitate, do not intubate, and then a power of attorney. So naming somebody that can make decisions for you in the sense, or in the event that you cannot make them for yourselves. That does not take away your ability to direct your own care until or unless you are, say, comatose and cannot make the decisions yourself. Then that would give whomever you designate as your power of attorney the power to make those decisions on your behalf. But the reason that document is important is because if it's not in place, and, for example, I'm gonna pick on Alan here. For example, Alan is my brother, and he is my closest living relative. I don't have a spouse. I don't have adult children. My mother and father are gone. So my adult brother is my next living closest relative. He's going to be called on to make decisions by South Dakota law. It's called a surrogate decision maker. Alan may or may not make the decisions that I really want him to make. Maybe we're estranged. Maybe we haven't talked. Maybe we've never talked about healthcare. Maybe we were very close, but we've never talked about that. And his views are very different from mine. So the reason a power of attorney is incredibly important is so that you can dictate who's making those decisions for you if you can't, because otherwise it's going to fall to, it starts with adult children, and then it goes to parents, and then siblings. There's a whole hierarchy of it that may or may not be making the decisions you want to be made. The DNR, the DNI, that goes along as well with like artificial nutrition and hydration. Again, do you want that to happen? Do you not want that to happen? Part of advanced care planning is, maybe you are okay with non-invasive methods for assistance with breathing, but the second you need to be intubated and on a ventilator, that's your line. So it's a little bit more complex than just, I don't want to be intubated. There's more to it. In South Dakota, the statewide, I guess, form for being a DNR is called a South Dakota Comfort One. It's a one-page form that's a triple carbon copy that it actually becomes a physician order as soon as your doctor signs it, and then actually EMS in Pierre gets a copy of that. You keep a copy of that, which I would always recommend keeping. A copy in your purse, a copy in your wallet, a copy on your refrigerator, a copy pretty much anywhere that you could be, because if Alan can't find that and he comes across, if he gets a call to come to your house, he has to start CPR. He can't not do that if there's not a document saying it's okay not to. And then another copy stays with the provider's office. Sorry, I knew there was a third one there. There is a newer, probably in the last, 5 years, form called the South Dakota MOST. It is South Dakota's version of the PULSE, which is the physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment. South Dakota, it's medical orders for it's something life-sustaining treatment, but it is basically advanced care planning in a one-page form, saying this is the code status I want, this is what I want for intubation, this is what I want for artificial nutrition and hydration. But the caveat with the MOST form is that it's something that your provider can do only if they feel you are in your last 12 months of life. So that is not going to be something that will be applicable to everybody, but it is something that your doctor may bring up to you at some point. I hope they do, but I also know that that is not always forefront in their minds. So I think that's all that was on my list.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you both so much. So kind of the way that we approach things is going to depend very much on which version of what you've heard about has happened. So again, my name's Rachel. I'm with the funeral home, but my background started in hospice. So I was introduced to death and dying in a hospice setting, and a hospice setting obviously looks very different from when 911 is called and the coroner is out and the police are out and the EMS are out. Those two scenarios are very different, and by no means are those the only two scenarios that we could face at the time of death. Sometimes we're in a hospital already. And sometimes we're in an accident, sometimes we're out of the country. There's a million different what ifs, and we do get a lot of those questions. A lot of what we try to do is take a situation that feels scary, that feels overwhelming, that sometimes it's just unknown. We try to bring that to a space of feeling under control with you, not for you, but with you. And so that's why we have these discussions ahead of time. But just rest assured that if you get to that place and you haven't had these discussions, that's okay, because you're going to meet Alan. You're going to meet someone that Molly works with, or Molly herself, and we're all here to help make that transition really smooth and as beautiful as possible. So like I said, I started in hospice and then transitioned into mortuary services. One thing I always tell people at the time of somebody's passing is you've been part of this person's life. This is your person. You know them inside and out. You know their wishes, their wants, what they're comfortable with and not. And whether, again, it's an emergency situation or a hospice situation, we're going to look to you for guidance as to what things should look like. And especially when you've been caring for them in a medical way, we're going to try to make that care look the same in death as it is in life. So this is not a body. This is not just any person. This is your person, and we're going to continue to treat them with that same care and respect that they had when they were being treated by a nurse or an EMT. So that is the first thing we're going to tell you. So there's a few questions we're going to ask you. Always questions. So the first thing, when we get the call, most of the time our call is going to be a medical professional of some kind. So that's going to be Alan. That's going to be the hospice nurse. Maybe the hospital nurse is going to call us. It could be any kind of medical professional that's there on the scene. If you call us first, that's okay. But we're going to tell you, is there a medical professional there or involved that we can chat with? Because we have to make sure that a medical person has pronounced somebody's passing. So that's step number one. We're going to ask, who is with you? And then we're going to ask, okay, who else? What family members are with you? What support system is with you? Is your pastor there praying with you? Is there a chaplain there with you? What is your support there in the home, in the hospital look like? So that's our first question. Who's with you? Who's with your person now that they have died? And then we're going to ask, when should we come? Like Molly said, sometimes we shouldn't come right away. It feels like we should. When somebody dies, you're going to get a switch is going to flip that you're going to say things need to be done right now. You're going to be rushing. You're going to be wanting things to happen very quickly. And that, again, that's not a wrong instinct, but there's actually plenty of time. We're going to tell you to take a deep breath, and we're going to ask you, is there anyone else coming? Is there a son or daughter that lives in the next town over that you'd like to come here to the bedside? Especially if we're going to be planning on cremation and you're not going to have a viewing, having time at the bedside can be really beautiful and a really nice time to say goodbye. So we're going to ask you, when should we come? So by South Dakota law, we have 24 hours to have a person either cooled down in refrigeration or embalmed. Now, if the EMTs have arrived and things don't look really beautiful and lovely, and it's not the person's not in their bed and very peaceful, we can come out to the home. We can make sure that they're cleaned up, that they're in a place that's really lovely, or we can bring them back here. We'll bathe, dress, and have someone on a little bed or a cot. So even if you're not going to have a casket, if that moment when they pass away was not the vision that you want to have for your final goodbye, we can change it. We can make sure that they're that person that you've loved for so long, that they have that dignity and you have that time to say goodbye. So it feels like the last moments, but there's often that opportunity to say goodbye. So we're going to ask you, when should we come? Do you need a little more time? Are there other people coming? We had a question from someone just a couple days ago. What if this is a mom who's lost her child and she wants the child to stay with her overnight? Okay, it's going to depend if the coroner's involved or something like that. But if hospice is involved, shoot, even if it's your dad who you want to have stay overnight, we're going to come out, we're going to get them cleaned up, we're going to make sure that we're maybe going to bring you some ice packs, we're going to make sure that that's a scenario where they're safe, they're cared for, and we're going to tuck everybody in for the night, and we'll come back in the morning. So we can give you a few more hours, a little bit more time, and that might mean that we come out a couple of times, and that's okay too. So just know there's a lot more options than maybe what you have in mind when that time comes. Next question we're going to ask you, how are Brett and I going to care for your person? So again, just like Molly said, having those conversations about your medical care, please have the conversation with the people you care about, whether they would like to have cremation or whether they would like to be embalmed. Now, those are not the only two options, but ultimately speaking, those are the main two ways that we're going to care for someone. Now, we don't rush them over to the crematory right away. So, but we do care for a person's body differently if we're going to have cremation without a big public viewing versus if we're going to have a public viewing, we're going to have maybe a casket, things like that. We are going to want to have that person embalmed right away. And that just helps us make sure that the experience is positive for everyone involved. So just kind of have in mind, if you have no other conversation about what you want, tell the people you care about if you want cremation or burial, you want your body donated to science, just have that one conversation if you can get through it. That's the number one thing we're going to want to know right away. And then we're going to ask, who else can we call to support you? Can we call your pastor to be involved in the conversation about this person's services? Can we call and notify maybe your adult children? Maybe we need to notify your sister, your neighbor to go feed the dog because you're at the hospital still. Whoever it is there anybody we can call to help you out and let people know what's going on? And we're going to set up an appointment with you to talk about what comes next. So the care that we're going to provide, what that looks like, how services should go. We'd love for your pastor or maybe somebody who's going to lead the service. Maybe it's your brother in, Carolina who is coming out to lead the service. Whoever that is, we want them to be part of that conversation for so many reasons. So we're gonna set up a time to get together to talk about things. We can wait for people to fly in. We can wait for people to get here to have that conversation, and we'll just be guiding you through those steps as we go. So just a couple of things to know about just things to do and not to do when someone passes away. I would say one of the things that we have people go back and tell us they wish they had done differently, and I'm going to reiterate something I've already said, but is to take a little bit more time. Just take the time you need. And the second thing is a lot of people tell us, I wish I had asked more questions and I wish I had known all of my options. So Alan went through a few different scenarios that maybe are not that beautiful, ideal, peaceful passing that we all wish we had. There is a lot that we can do to help guide you through the next several days to help kind of not mitigate, but process a death that maybe wasn't what you wanted it to be, wasn't what you pictured it being. So ask the questions, let us guide you, because we will be honest with you. If somebody's in an accident or had something kind of traumatic happen, that does not mean that you cannot see them. It might mean that you might not have a positive experience, but ask us first. Never assume that we can't have something happen or some kind of time for you to spend with the person that will kind of help you process what is going on in life. Sometimes that even means having a few days where you come back and see a person more than once even. So just those are the two big things. Take your time, ask the questions, have somebody you trust to ask questions of. And I will tell you, if you are using a different funeral home, that is okay. You can still ask us questions. So sometimes I'll have people, the death has happened in another state or out of town, or they already had pre-arrangements to somewhere in Sioux Falls, but they have a couple questions and they're comfortable asking us because we're right here down the street. Just call us. No big deal. We're happy to answer questions. We're happy to help guide you in what to expect. But that time of someone's passing, we want to bring it to a space of feeling under control and not so scary. So that is kind of our little spiel. If you want to know more about some of those other pieces and parts of planning, like I said, we're certainly happy to answer those questions. But that kind of covers that initial time when we get involved from either Alan or hospice care or hospital or anything like that. So when we talk about planning and planning for dying, Besides embalming and cremation, we're also going to want to know where somebody's going to be laid to rest. So we invited Harold here to talk a little bit about our local cemetery, because that actually, I would say maybe up to 50% of our phone calls are questions for the cemetery. So we pass them on along to the cemetery. And so we'll have him chat a little bit about what that looks like.
Thank you, Rachel. Good afternoon, everybody. Harold Timmerman, from right here in Lenox, County Emergency Manager, and also the Chairman of the Cemetery Board. Our cemetery was incorporated back in 1882, and it was platted out in 1901, and we have about 12.5 acres that we're actively using now, and we have some more ground purchased to the south that we can expand the cemetery should we need to. We sell our graves out there for $500 a grave. And if you buy a grave, you'll get a deed for that grave, or if you buy a whole lot, or how many graves you buy, you'll get a deed for that. And it's good to keep that deed handy, because if you find out you don't need those graves, and we've had this happen, we'll buy them back for the purchase price that you paid for them. So don't feel like you're ever going to be stuck with a grave there. You can always sell them back should you not need them. We ask that nobody plants anything in the ground out there. We've got some bushes that we're gradually trying to get away from. Flowers are supposed to be in pots so that it's easier for the people that mow it to take care of it. We the board goes through there 2 or 3 times a year just to pick up litter that is blown around from the wind that we get plenty of around here. A lot of artificial flowers blow apart. Sometimes things blow over. And if the family is nowhere around here, there's nobody to come and take care of their grave. So we go out and pick up that debris and take care of it so the cemetery stays neat. We used to have barrels out there that people could put cemetery garbage in, but I was hauling more personal garbage home from people's houses than I was cemetery stuff. So we discontinued that. People like to take advantage of that. So if you need to have a grave opened, it costs $625. Dave and Tanner Tipton do that for us and do an excellent job. If you need an urn buried for a cremation, it's $425. So, and we do allow 4 cremains to go on one single grave. $100 of your purchase price for that grave goes to our perpetual fund, which is what we use to take care of the mowing and the snow removal and any other maintenance we have to do at the cemetery. We had to take several ash trees down like everybody else is having to do because they were dying and looking terrible, so we had that done too. We do have a hard surface road fund that was established years ago to where we've done paving of the roads in there, and we have plans to do more as we expand the cemetery. So we keep some money put aside just for that. So as you can imagine, everything is getting more costly all the time. And I think if you compare cemeteries like in Canton or Sioux Falls, our graves are pretty reasonable. So we try and keep it that way as much as we can. We ask that, I'll talk a little bit now about planning ahead. A lot of times, as Rachel said, the last thing people think about is buying a cemetery grave. Some people have purchased them in advance, and it's just one more thing you don't have to deal with when one of your loved ones passes. And Marlon Jacobson is in charge of selling all of our graves out at the cemetery. And he'll work with you to try, if you have a preferred spot, he'll try and get you a grave right there. And sometimes people want to go in a place where it won't work. So he'll guide you through that whole process and does an excellent job with that. I'll talk a little bit as an emergency manager, and part of my job is to plan ahead. And I've written plans for the county, for the courthouse, and for everything. And when I used to also work in the funeral home here with Joel, when you have a family that all of a sudden a death happens that they're not expecting and they don't have anything planned ahead, those people are terribly lost and stressed. When you have a family that has some of that planned ahead, some people plan their whole service before they pass away. And some people do none of that. So it's a totally different thing. And the Jarmans are great about guiding people through that. But the more you can do to plan ahead, just as this meeting here today is great that the Jarmans have put this thing together. And we kind of got planning ahead a little bit by, I won't say accident, but when one of our granddaughters passed away at birth is when we bought our graves out there. So when our oldest son passed away, we didn't have to deal with that. And it's just one less thing that can stress you at that point in time. So I have to leave a little bit early, but I'll hang around for questions if anybody has any. And we have a pastor here from West Prairie and pastor here from Chancellor Reformed. They have separate cemeteries. They can guide you through some of their things too, should you need to have that happen. So thank you.
Thanks, Harold. Hey, everybody. He kind of hit on what I get to hit on. My name is Angie Maris, and I am called the pre-need counselor. Sounds fancy, right? It just means I help with the pre-planning. And so many people think that that just means paying for your funeral. There's so much more important things than that. There's stages to the planning. How many of you guys have been to a funeral that has already been planned? You knew everything. Songs, what they wanted, raise them high. Such a gift, such a gift. And how many of you have been to one where nothing was planned? Right? It just makes a huge, huge difference. And like Harold said, I want to thank Rachel and Brett for doing this. This is just wonderful for people to know how important that planning is, okay? There are some really wonderful tools that they can use with you to figure out everything from the wishes. If you guys want to pull out, there's a sheet that we did up, and it says the financial side, but it's kind of everything if you want to follow along with that. It's really helpful to make an appointment time with Rachel and Brett. They want to meet you guys. We are so blessed here in Lennox to have a couple that lives here. It's a family operated operation. We're very, very blessed that they bought this funeral home, right? And look at what a wonderful job they've done. I mean, they've got some big shoes to fill with Jay, and I think they're just doing a wonderful job. So anyway, they would really, really like to meet you. So if you call and make an appointment with them, they'd love to sit down with you and talk about what exactly it is that you want, and they can take notes and do that. Now, that's kind of the wishes side of thing. It gives you a lot of peace of mind knowing and being able to talk about what are the different options. Do I want a traditional funeral? Do I want a cremation? Do I want the in-between where I have a rental casket so the family gets to say goodbye and see me, but then I save a little money and be cremated? Those are some nice things to know in advance. If we know those things, then we're able to do estimates for you and everything. So okay, well, what would a funeral cost that I would like to have? And we'll walk through all of those things with you as well and help you make those decisions at a time when it's not so hard. What I do is so much easier than what these guys do. The way before you need it is so much better. We laugh, we joke, it's. Another thing is talk to your children a little bit. So often I meet with families and I'll have a gentleman say something like, just wrap me in a blanket and throw me in the ditch. Yeah, right? We're not going to do that, number one. And what I always want to say is, now if your son died, would you do that to him? Would you be okay with that? And then they kind of, So keep in mind that the funeral is not for us. It's for our loved ones, right? It's for letting them know what you want, but also letting them tell you what's important to them. One of the things I've learned, I've been doing pre-planning now for about 7 years. And my mom was a pre-need planner for over 10 years, and she just loved it. And she was like, Angie, you should really get into this. And I thought, I don't know. I'm going to be, talking about funerals. I absolutely love it. Like I said, it's way before you need it. We're laughing, we're joking. It's very laid back. But what am I getting at? One of the things that was very surprising to me is how often I would hear people say, and they cremated her and I didn't get to say goodbye. For some people, it is a very big deal to be able to see you, say goodbye before they no longer can, So ask them about those things and find out if those things are important, okay? So that's kind of your peace of mind. In order to protect your money, I'm gonna get into the financial side a little bit because those are a lot of the questions I get. So what does that look like, paying for a funeral? So often people think you have to pay the whole thing. If you want to pay in advance, you have to pay the whole thing, and you don't. There are payment plans that people can do so that we can spread it out over time and make it so that it fits in anybody's budget. There are ways to make it so that it works kind of like an insurance in that while you're paying for it, you're covered for your whole funeral. Okay, so that's an interesting little piece. Like, say we started a payment plan for you so much a month, and 5 months in, something happens, you get in a car accident, you pass away. The way these plans that we use work is that the whole funeral would be paid for even though you've only paid in 5 months and your family doesn't pay the difference, which is kind of neat. We're able to do 3-year, 5-year, 10-year payment plans. So literally we can get anybody started. If you even just have a certain amount, you're saying, I would like to pay so much a month towards my funeral. That's something we're able to do as well. So it's kind of nice to offer you that. Another thing that we get a lot of questions on is protecting that money. Have you guys heard that before? Like if a person is to go into the nursing home, I'll have people say, well, how do we protect this money? Okay. There's really 2 ways to protect your assets or your money for your funeral. It has to be in an irrevocable burial trust. They do them, number one, through the bank, or we do them through companies. The company we use is called Great Western. It's not Great Western Bank, it's Great Western Insurance. And what's nice about them is that, and why we like to use them, is number one, they pay a little bit better interest. These plans do earn interest to help hedge against inflation. Now, it's not like you're taking it to a financial advisor. You're not going to make 9% on it, but they're meant to be so you make enough on them to hedge against inflation. So your money is put away, but it's also going to be growing because, as you know, your funeral over the years is going to continue to go up, but so is your plan, okay? The protection part of it, if a person was to end up in a nursing home, it's a very expensive situation. I hear $10,000 to $15,000 a month, depending on the nursing home, depending on level of care, and they do wonderful work in these places. They earn that money, don't get me wrong, but people's assets dwindle pretty quickly when they're putting out that much a month towards care. So it's quite often where a family will end up in a situation where they need to be put on state aid or financial assistance to help them pay for that nursing home. One of the things that really anything that is considered an asset, the nursing home can use that or take that to help pay your way in the nursing home until you get down to what we call the asset limit, or what they call, I should say, which is $2,000. Once a person is down to $2,000, then the state will step in and they'll put that person on Title 19 or financial assistance and help them pay their way in their nursing home. There's different rules for single people and for couples, okay? For a couple, just basically any asset that you have, your house, your car, bank accounts, stocks, life insurance a lot of times, because life insurance is considered an asset, are all taken to help pay your way. Okay, till you get down to that $2,000. Now, for couples, you have to use your combined assets to pay for that one person until you get down to a certain amount. And I don't know the exact amount. It's between $250,000 and $300,000 in assets. Once you get down to that point, then it splits. The person that's in the nursing home gets their half. So let's say 125,000, and the person at home gets their half. Let's say the other 125,000. They get to stay in their home. They get one vehicle, and they get to keep their Social Security or financial aid, their what's coming in monthly for their care. Now, 20 years ago, that was different. Everybody, it was really hard for the person that was at home to get by because pretty much everything went to the one that was in care. So it's a lot better than it used to be. The one that's at home is fine. They've got their house, their car, they're well taken care of, which is great. In the meantime, the one that's in the nursing home has to use their $125,000 to pay their own way till they get down to that $2,000 that we talked about, and then they get put on the aid. Okay. One of the few things that the state will allow you to have is an irrevocable burial fund of reasonable value. That's what these are. These prepaid funerals or prepaid irrevocable trust is protected. They can't touch that. No matter what, your funeral is paid for and nobody has to worry about that, even if you did end up in that situation. Okay, so that's another one of the main reasons. There's kind of 4 reasons why families will pre-plan and prepay. The first one is those wishes, letting your family know what you want, and getting together and talking about it is very, very helpful for you. Sometimes we'll have families come in and nobody knows what they wanted because they never ever talked about it. So, that wishes is a big deal. It helps control a lot of things. Like, I don't know what it is. When you throw a family in, sometimes families will bicker, even families that get along awesome. So the more things that we have done in advance, the less of that we run into. The second reason is that hedging against inflation, so they'll get it taken care of for that. The third is that protection from the nursing home or from, Medicaid. And then the fourth one, I kind of call the parent factor because I really feel like a lot of the families that I meet with, the whole reason they're doing it is because they're looking at it from the standpoint of, I want this difficult day to be as easy on my family as it can be, And those of you that said, yep, I've had one already planned, so much easier on the family if we know in advance what that person wants, So that's why people will get taken of that peace of mind of knowing a difficult day is going to be as easy as we can make it. So we're celebrating their life instead of worrying about how it's going to get paid for and all those little details that we're able to take care of in advance.
All right, thanks, Angie. Yeah, so we're all a team, and like Harold said, we got a couple pastors here. They're part of our team. Your family's part of our team. Our goal is just to make this really difficult time just a tiny bit easier in any way that we possibly can. So none of us are like jazzed about the prospect of facing that final day, but we can definitely look forward to what's next and look forward to making it easier on folks. So that brings us to our time for questions. Ask us anything. My favorite sports team, don't ask, I don't have one, but other than that, you can ask. So yeah, we'll open up the floor. Tell us who you want to talk to, and we'll repeat the question on the mic, and then we'll try and answer it for you. Well, one thing actually that came up when Molly was talking about crossing state lines, it kind of triggered my brain because we get that question a lot too. So for a funeral home to bring a person into their care, so if Brett and I get a call and say it's from hospice and they say, we have this person in our care in Iowa, over in Inwood, and we would love for you to care for their body. So the funeral home, we do need to have a permit for what comes next. And we also need to be licensed in that state to be able to do our job in that state. So we can actually respond directly to the state of Iowa, for instance. I have a license in Iowa, but if we get a call in Minnesota, we cannot go to the home and bring that person into our care. And so what we do, we have partner funeral homes in all of those places. And so, for instance, we're going to be caring for someone who's right now living in Florida. We're still going to take the call from the nurse because we're ultimately going to care for this person. So we're going to take the call from the hospice nurse in Florida, and then we're going to work with a partner there, so a funeral home that we trust and have vetted ahead of time. They're going to go to the hospice, bring the person into their care. We're going to help direct that care, make sure it goes smoothly. That way, families are only working with one person. They don't have to answer the same questions over and over and over again. So just a little bit of insight into how that works. But yes, in our area, sometimes it's like 10 miles away, but another state. So it's a little bit tricky, but always just ask and we can help guide you through that. Other questions? Yeah, Mark. Yes, so cremated remains can be brought across state lines with no problem. There's no legal reason you cannot transport a loved one's cremated remains. They can also be shipped via USPS in a very specifically labeled, specifically carried box. It's very loudly labeled so that it is not lost. I've never had USPS lose a person. Sometimes people are distrustful, but they are very, very cautious with that. You can also fly with cremated remains. However, if it were my loved one, I would honestly probably ship, just because flying is unpredictable sometimes, and while you might have all the right paperwork in place, if something crazy internationally were to happen and you show up to the airport and they all of a sudden change the rules on you, you're going back home. So, you can fly with them, you can drive across state lines, yep. Other questions? That is a really good question. So the question is, we've talked about maybe accidents or somebody all of a sudden has a heart attack. We've talked about hospice. What if somebody just doesn't wake up tomorrow and you can tell they've been gone for a while? Do you have a DNR or no? Or say you don't. You're still going to call 911. Now, if your wife calls me, I am going to say, I am so sorry you're going through this. We're going to call 911 and the EMTs are going to come. Now they're going to ask you, I'm going to let Alan speak to kind of how they're going to figure out how they respond to that.
Most of those questions are actually going to be asked by dispatch. They're going to ask questions like, when was the last time the patient was seen well? What time did you go to bed last night? Any medical history and things like that. When they've determined that it's an obvious death, that the patient is gone, they will send out EMS and most likely law enforcement of some kind. We will come out and in Lincoln County, we call the deaths. In Turner County, the coroner still comes out, and then we transport accordingly from there. Or we call the funeral home, or whatever the situation may be, but we take care of it from there.
Other questions?
One other question. On the cemetery, we've been looking at stones, and they've told us that some cemeteries charge to put stones out of the cemeteries now, some don't.
We make that cost not to you, but to the monument company. They'll contact Marlon Jacobson. He goes out there with them to make sure they get the stone placed in the right spot, and then they get charged a small charge just for bringing it out. And they have to be on a concrete slab, so they don't settle.
When we were looking at stones, they said some cemeteries will charge you $500 to place the stone. Some cemeteries don't charge you at all.
Yeah, we charge a minimal amount. I can't tell you off the top of my head what it is, but And for you, the cost will be the purchasing of the grave only. So that cost for placing the monument gets passed on to the monument company.
That's a good question. Yeah, placing a monument. And like Harold said earlier, cemeteries in this area and all over the country, costs vary widely. So visit the cemetery, see where you feel comfortable being, or if it's where your family's always been, you just pay whatever it is. But the cost varies thousands and thousands of dollars depending on where you choose to be buried.
Paperwork question.
Yes.
To that section, you talked about some forms. Google would call you, several of those that you do not necessitate
Yeah.
or if it's in your will, or not your will, but
Kind of like your medical record.
living will.
Okay.
Yeah, so I suppose if there's a certain form we're looking for, just call you and you'll direct us.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is some of those advanced directive forms, where do you get them? So Molly can probably tell you a little bit about that.
I should have brought some with me. Avera and Sanford both have, I think it's 2 page. I know Avera's is 2 pages. I think Sanford's is 2 pages. It is a document that lays out both healthcare power of attorney as well as a living will. And that can either be notarized or signed by 2 witnesses. And then that becomes a legal healthcare power of attorney document. The South Dakota Comfort One form is going to be, that has to be ordered from healthcare providers through the state of South Dakota. So your provider should have that. If not, you can contact me. I've got a whole stack of them, but I did not think to bring those because I've been on the road all day.
Yeah, so go ahead and fill out that form. Molly will get it to you. She's the person to talk to about that, the form that we gave you today. And, you know, there are tons of different versions of various types of planning guides. So when we talk about having these conversations, it's not just cremation or burial. It's not just do not resuscitate or do resuscitate. So just like everybody here has kind of had a lot of like complex, like, well, what if this happens? It's not black and white. And so if you do have questions, there are so many resources out there, and I'd be happy to get you to the right person, the right form. There's a couple of really neat initiatives nationally through healthcare organizations. There's one called the Conversation Project. It's really good and has just a lot of like questions that kind of go through and help you figure out how to answer those healthcare directives, stuff like that. But having a person like Molly or a provider at your doctor's office, a social worker, sometimes lawyers, although I hesitate to recommend lawyers, but sometimes they can help you, especially with power of attorney. I mean, they can definitely help you with that, but maybe they're not the ones to talk to about intubation, you know, so just finding that right person is a good thing.
Okay, my other question is for Harold then. I think you said something about having, well, anyway, we've got some burial spots, don't have paperwork or, had for a long time, a couple of them. We did some communication with Elaine Anderson, she was the spot. So it was, I was like, okay, I hope nothing's wrong. You know, when we need them, check with Marlon Jacobson on them.
Yeah, you can check with him now if you want to. He's got a book of the outline of the whole cemetery and where all the graves are and who's buried where. And it'd be good to talk to him ahead of time if you have any questions, so that you don't have to worry about that when the time comes that you actually need them. So, and I'll put a plug in for the pastors too, because if you have a pastor, that can be one of the biggest comforts you can have when something like this happens. If you have a church and you have a pastor, it's way more comforting than somebody that's never been to church and is afraid to death of a funeral home. So talk to your pastor. Let him know some of the things that you like too, because they can also guide you. I'm sure when the Jarman family meets with you, they may ask the pastor to be there too because they're trying to plan your funeral, whether that's cremation or just a viewed casket. So don't forget to talk to those people also.
Yeah.
No, you can put one casket in a plot, but you can put 4 cremains in one casket spot, one grave. Yeah. We don't allow putting cremains on top of a casket because it'd be confusing and how would you keep that straight, if you ever wanted to go back and look who's buried where, so. But you just one casket per grave and then 4 cremains per grave, but not both on the same grave.
Yeah.
Does the cemetery require vaults?
Does the cemetery require vaults?
The cemetery requires a vault or a concrete grave box. That way you don't have the settling that we've had over time in some of our older parts of the cemetery. And that is one requirement that we have. So a concrete grave box is going to be a little cheaper than a vault, but it's up to the family what they want to do at that point in time. That's another thing you can give some thought to, and Jarman's can give you some insight on that also.
Yeah, burial vaults are something that some people do think that that's a state or legal requirement, but it is a cemetery requirement. And it does not have to be the fanciest thousands of dollars expensive vault. We can definitely chat with you about what type of vault meets the needs of the cemetery and what type of vault meets the needs of your family and your wishes. So, there are lots of variations in that as well. And different cemeteries have different requirements as far as that goes. So.
Cemetery takes care of, seeding, planting the grass.
We ask you to do that. Plant grass on top of the grave. Right after the burial, you'll see a mound there, and that's going to settle. Oops. Better have the mic, huh? There's going to be a mound there. You'll see that quite often out at the cemetery. That's going to settle. And then we don't plant the grass on there. We ask the family to do that. We mow it and maintain it after that. But we ask the family to do that.
Other questions? Yeah, Joanne.
I have a question on your ashes.
Yeah.
So are there rules about what you can do with the ashes? Can you bury them in your backyard? Can you put them on a mountain stream? What are the rules, regulations on ashes?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. What are the rules and regulations on ashes or cremated remains, and what can you do with them? This is a question we also get a lot, and so many things have changed, even in the years that I've been doing this since 2016. Even then, things have changed. The short answer is on private property, you can scatter or bury the cremated remains however you would like. It's not an issue. And the long answer is if you want to put them anywhere else, sometimes it's actually really hard to find out if it's legal or not. So we used to live in Colorado, and in Rocky Mountain National Park, you could actually apply for a permit to scatter the ashes. They asked that you did not do so right on a public pathway where there's lots of traffic or foot traffic. So we would apply for a permit and go scatter on behalf of families that maybe couldn't get to town to do anything. You cannot do it at Disney World. They will never allow you back, ever. Pebble Beach, that's another place that they strictly forbid it. Not that people don't sneak some in their pocket, but so it's actually kind of hard to figure out where it is and is not legal. As far as from the air, you just have to be, per FAA standards, you have to be high enough that the ashes dissipate before they get to the ground. So a couple thousand feet in the air and you're legal. People can put ashes into fireworks. They can, what else do? They put ashes into glass art. They put they put supposedly they make ashes into diamonds. No, I think you find a reputable company and they'll create a stone or a diamond out of your ashes. Just kind of do your research if you're going to do something like that and pick a company that's reputable. But yes, for the most part on private property, or if you're very subtle, you're going to be just fine scattering ashes. But we're happy to do that research for you. Again, no matter who cared for your loved one, if you have questions about that, we can do some research for you. At sea, I think you have to be a certain amount off the coastline, depending on where you're at. So, good question. Okay. Thanks, Harold. If you want to talk more to Harold, give me your info and we'll have him call you. Call the Lincoln County Emergency Management line and you can get him. Other questions that anybody has? That is also a good question for Harold at a different time. He's never had it happen that he knows of. Oh, I know people have done it at various places. I will tell you, one of the types of cemeteries that I know is very strictly regulated are national or veteran cemeteries. They do not allow you to scatter cremated remains on top of an existing grave. Again, I'm sure it has happened, but that is one place I know for a fact they don't allow it. We've worked with so many rural cemeteries in Colorado and here in South Dakota. Some rural cemeteries I've been told, oh yeah, just have the family take a shovel out and bury the urn themselves. That's fine. I've been told, yes, scatter them on the grave. I've been told, nope, we don't need a vault or nothing. Just, Joe with the backhoe is going to come down and do it. So we'll do the research for you. Just let me know. I'll call and figure out who to talk to. We'll get the research done for you if that's something that you're interested in a various different cemeteries. So, yeah. Let us help you. Other questions?
Just a statement. I've recently done my pre-planning. I had stuff on hand here with Jay from my wife passing about 5 years ago. And before I even knew this was going to come up, I came in and talked to Jarman's and got it a little more finalized, although I'm not going to be micromanaging my own service. It feels better knowing I got it down on paper. They asked me questions. I got some more information down and correct. My daughters know I was here. I told them don't get excited. I don't have a medical condition that I'm aware of. But the odds are I've seen way more in the past than I'll see in the future. So that's just the way it is. I recommend for your own peace of mind and your own family members to come in and talk to Jarman's or your funeral home of choice and kind of get some of that stuff going, get your questions answered. I learned some more here tonight on what I'm going to check into already, just for my own peace of mind. I highly recommend it. You're not going to hide from dying. I don't want to. I want to live forever, bury my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids. I couldn't live with myself. Anyway, I highly recommend you follow up and come in and talk to people one-on-one.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Yeah. So, Jim talking about pre-planning and talking to your funeral person. Again, we're not here to plug our funeral home. We want to care for and love our community. And if that's you, wonderful. Come in and chat with us. But you should trust the person that's going to care for your loved one. So if your loved one lives in a different place, just give a phone call to the funeral home. And if you get a yucky feeling, try again. And then if you get another yucky feeling, maybe call somebody else. We try a couple times to find the right doctor, to find the right dentist. to find the right person to mow our lawn, we might make 2 or 3 calls till we find somebody we're comfortable with. So how much more important to really find somebody you're comfortable with to care for your loved ones or yourself. So no matter where that is or who that is, just know them makes a difference.
That's another question that we get a lot is, well, I don't know where I'm going to be. What if I move to Arizona or I move over here to be closer to my daughter? Or just because you pre-plan it here doesn't mean you have to do it here. Even if you do a prepaid or an irrevocable burial trust, you own that trust. So you can use it at any funeral home you want. It doesn't mean you're locked in here. You can use it anywhere.
Yeah, that's a really good point because things change. So yeah, we'll even just make copies of everything, get it to the funeral home you've chosen, fill them in. We're not holding your information hostage. We want to make sure your plan goes with you. Yep. Any other questions about dying? Yeah.
Not a question about dying, but a question about dealing with death. So as a pastor, I get to see kind of a lot of different sides of this, and especially the work that y'all do. I see you do it quietly and with courage and strength, and I always wonder, how do we do this? What gets you through this battle of not only your own emotions about death, but everybody else's, and what keeps you thinking and passionate about this kind of work? This goes to any of y'all.
This is a big question for all of us. So, the question is, how do we do this? Essentially, I mean, it was much more eloquently put than that. And I think, honestly, that answer is going to be different for every single one of us. For Brett and I'm pretty confident speaking for both of us because we're pretty much interchangeable. We're 2 pieces of one unit. And kind of like I said, we want to love people. We want to care for people. And this is the way that we've found that we're made to do that. We were created to do this for folks. And I never would have imagined that this is where I would end up. Brett's wanted to do this since he was about 8. You will never meet another human being who wanted to be an undertaker at the age of 8. He could tell you about it. But honestly, the very first time I was with someone when they died, when I worked in hospice, it was that most beautiful experience that we all want. And it ceased my fear of dying, and it led me to my life's work. So, and now what kind of keeps us going? For Brett and I will tell you a lot of that is each other. We're able to support each other. We're able to look at people's lives, hear about their lives, learn about their lives. We love it. We love looking at the pictures. We love hearing the stories when it's really sad and hard and it's not somebody who should have died and we're kind of angry about it. All of us collectively as a community, we're angry about it. Those are the ones that are really tough. But those are also the ones that lead us to find that strength. I had someone help me with that early on in my career when it was a death that shouldn't have happened, and we were mad and upset, and collectively, it was hard. And what kind of keeps us going in those situations is that I get to be the person that sits across from the mom or the sister, and I get to say, I know you're going to live through this, and you are going to get through it because I'm going to be here with you and because I've watched other people do it. Seeing the strength of human beings is such a reward and such a wonderful part of this. And we can't do it alone. We have each other, not just the 2 of us, but all of us. And so for us, I think that's what we kind of look to keep us going. And in those situations where it's somebody's life we're just really celebrating and we get to laugh and we get to look at the pictures and stuff, we kind of learn about our own lives, and we learn about them, but we also learn from them how we want to live. So that's kind of what keeps us going. I'm sure Brett would have other stuff to tell you about for him personally, but that's kind of what I know about us.
I feel like people that are called to this service are called by God. I mean, they really do have Like I told you guys, I have the easy part. I get to see you before, way before it happens. And so we do a lot of laughing and joking and, just talking ahead. Still, I love it. I get so many hugs, all very, very often. Oh, thank you so much. You made it so easy. Those are my best things to hear, that, we're going to make that day a little bit easier. But the funeral directors, I mean, that call to serve, I think, comes directly from God. And it takes a very, very special person to do what these guys do. It's absolutely a calling, I think.
Thanks, Angie.
I really feel like being a part of somebody's end of life journey is probably one of the biggest honors that anybody could ask of me. I tell friends and people I know very well that a few of them have called me for their own loved ones, and I'm sure they think I'm pulling their leg, but there's no greater honor than to have somebody contact you because they trust you for that. I've met people who I still talk to this day because I was a really big part of a really hard time in their life. And it isn't always easy. Certainly there are harder ones than others. But to be able to be a part of that and to be able to help both, I guess in my case, the patient and the family be at peace with the end of life, find, do that last trip or make that last event or what have you, and to be there walking that journey with them, holding their hands, holding their family's hands. There's nothing like it. And it is, I go into rooms and I talk to people who are just mad at the world sometimes because they're in this position and they're having to talk to me. And the amount of times I've gotten to walk out of that room giving them a hug and they are smiling and they are just, you can quite frankly see the weight of the world come off of them, knowing that they have the support and we are going to be there, is my why. And that's something that I hold in very high regard. So
They all said this probably far better than I will. Like Rachel said, I never expected myself to be doing what I did now. I actually have a design degree from SDSU and somehow ended up as a paramedic later in life. Through a strange set of circumstances. However, I believe truly it is a calling what we do. If you guys know anybody in EMS and know them well, you will understand this, that we are all a little broken. We're an odd bunch. But it's part of being that odd bunch that makes us into a family, and that's how we get through the stuff. A lot of the deaths we hear over here are, it's nice, clean, it's a nice way to pass. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff we see is not that way. We get the gruesome, we get the unexpected, we get the families who never dreamt this was going to be their day. And it depends on who you are, which calls hit the hardest. I mean, I've got kids. When we have calls with kids that are similar age to mine, those are tough. Or, similar age to your parents or things like that. But you're a family, you get through it that way, and it truly is an honor to be part of that process. I've done it many, many times over the years. So, and if you guys do not have experience with hospice, please get some information. Hospice is a wonderful thing. Truly, truly wonderful thing.
sorry, I'm going to throw a real quick plug in there for that. That is my number one thing. I tell people all the time, I don't care if you use Avera Hospice. I don't care if you use hospice, period. Get educated. It is not what you think it is. It is not, I'm dying tomorrow. It's not, I'm dying next week. It is much, much, much more than that. I can't stress enough, ask the questions. Like I said, I don't care if you ever call me again, but in order to just learn and know ahead of time, it is so much easier to have that information before you're in crisis time than it is. You're never going to hear everything I say if I'm meeting you and you really are in those last few days of your loved one's life. So.
Yeah, that's why we're here, to talk about it and make it a conversation ahead of time. So yeah, other questions?
I should have probably asked this when you were talking about out of state. We go to Arizona for an extended period of time and I pass. I know I want to have my services here.
Yeah.
This funeral home. We know we're going to be buried in the cemetery out there because we have a plot in our stone. However, I'm there and you're here. What is the first thing that you should do?
Yeah.
Contact you or someone there?
Good question. So the question is, if you maybe go down to Arizona for a few months, and do you do it every year, or is this like a regular thing that you go down there? Okay, so yeah, so we do work with a lot of folks who spend time elsewhere. Maybe they're visiting, they visit family for a month out of the year in another state. And so the question is, what do you do? All your plans are here, your services are here. You're going to work with the funeral home where the services will happen. So we're going to be the call that you make. Now, that being said, if you know you go down to Arizona for 3 months every single year, let's talk about it now, because we'll find somebody we trust down there. We'll put the name in your file. We'll put their phone number. They're going to know that we'll call them. We'll know what they're going to charge us. All of that can be done ahead. Again, if it happens on the fly, you're traveling in a different state and it happens, that's okay too. Always call the funeral where you have your arrangements already made, the funeral home where your services are going to be. The advantage to that there's 2 reasons that we do it that way. One is we're going to meet with you to talk about, or your family to talk about the services and plan the services. And we don't want you to have to answer those same questions more than one time. So we're going to plan the services. Then we work on that back end to make sure the logistics go smoothly, that we have somebody to embalm that we trust to do so, that we make the plane ticket, that we book the plane ticket to get here, or the drive, depending on where we're going to pick somebody up. So we're going to handle all the logistics of getting you here. And then really all the family worries about is just the normal stuff. What music are we going to sing? What kind of sandwiches are we going to eat? The stuff that really is important. So, but we'll handle all the logistics. And that also, the second reason that we do it that way is that funeral home is going to discount their services. So they're going to discount the cost to perform those services, because they're not spending that time gathering your information and filling out paperwork with you and planning your services. We're just sending them the information. They're going to do a couple things for us as far as that direct care goes, and they're going to discount that cost. So hopefully we can mitigate some of the costs that way too. Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions? All right. If you think of any, all of us are available. You can come chat afterwards. There's also that little form. Please do fill this out. Even if you don't want any of us to call you, that's okay. We won't. But put in there, if you have other topics you would like us to cover. Like I said, we're looking at a grief, some kind of grief seminar. I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet. But we're really happy to engage any kind of education that you want. As far as this topic goes, it's a topic we don't get to talk about often in life unless you're us. And then we talk about it all the time. So thank you so much for coming. Do let people know if they ask you how it went. I'm going to put the recording up tomorrow on our website, and it'll be on our YouTube page in case people couldn't come. There's a ton of fun stuff going on right now in town, and I'm sure there's way more funner things that they wanted to do tonight than be here, but we're so glad you joined us, and we appreciate it.